Auden Schendler is Senior Vice President of Sustainability at the Aspen Skiing Company, where he works on scale solutions. Hope to hear more about that. To climate change, including clean energy development, policy, advocacy, and activism. Along with Protect Our Winters, POW, known around here, he is working to mobilize the outdoor industry as a political force like the NRA. Good comparison. No, I do think that's a good comparison. Previously, a research associate at Rocky Mountain Institute, when I first moved to Aspen, Auden's work has been covered in Business Week, Men's Journal, Fast Company, and Outside. And he is the author of the book Getting Green Done, which climatologist James Hansen called an antidote to greenwash. As you learned last night, Auden was the spark that started my journey to co-found PSC, for which I am forever grateful. Please welcome Auden Schendler.
Are you going to stay there?
We talked about mentors yesterday, and by far and away, two of my best ones are right there and right over there with the curly hair. Catherine Greener. They have taught me both so much. And I have my Google alerts so I can talk, or whenever Auden Schendler pops up, I stop whatever I'm doing. Read your article in the Princeton Review or Harvard. So thank you.
Another one of your life mistakes, having me on.
I'm done.
Okay, so Chris, I'm here because Chris is amazing, and he asked me for like 5 years, and I was like, all right, I'll come do this thing. And that's why you're all here. He's so persistent and so good and so all in. And tonight, I'm gonna recognize what you've done. You've been here 10 years. You're all like, look, there's so many people here. You are the hardcore left at the end of this 2-day conference. It's hard to be here. It's beautiful outside. I'm gonna compliment you on what you've done, and I'm gonna ask you to do something else. And this is not critical, it's additional. But it's not gonna be necessarily easy to hear what I'm talking about. That's my preface. Let's see if I'm gonna show you a video of my son, Elias. This is probably 8 years ago. He just turned 16. Today is his birthday. And this is Elias in my backyard in Basalt, chopping wood. I want you to look at his face when he completes the task of splitting this piece of wood. He doesn't do it perfectly. Don't be critical. Oh, okay, so Laura.
We'll do it for you.
Okay, watch Elias's face. He's chopping. It's pretty good. He doesn't cut his foot off. He doesn't cut the hose. Look at his face. Look at his face. Do you know that expression? It's the expression you had when you first tried Frosted Flakes, right? Or when you were on a carousel, or your kid was on a carousel for the first time. Absolute joy, awe, happiness. And we always talk about sustainability. This picture is sustainability. What's going on there? It's a boy who's healthy in a stable environment, practicing a skill that has been passed down for generations. That was his grandfather's axe. And the first hafted axe was invented 5,000 years ago. This is what humans do. The climate, this is 10 years ago, the climate is relatively stable, the air is clean. This is sustainability. Or it's eudaimonia, which Aristotle described as human flourishing. This is what we're talking about here. Like sustainability gets bogged down in, well, it's an economic thing. All the economic activities on the coast. This is about business. It's about national security. No, it's not. It's about our humanity and protecting our humanity. This is a map of soil moisture content in 2100 done by NOAA. So the darker colors on the map are soil moisture content equal to the Dust Bowl. This is 2095. So Elias will be about 90. When he was little, he'd say, Dad, I'm going to be an old little man one day. He'll be an old little man in Colorado, right there. And if you thought we had problems, immigration challenges, wars when we were fighting over oil or in the current climate, look at Latin America and Mexico. There's no water there. And look at the American Southwest, which is a huge recreational hub, and tons of people live there, and water critical already. What's going to happen then? So sustainability is not possible for Elias and for anyone if we let climate change proceed apace. And you don't need to know that much about it to understand that. So I'm going to deviate here. Is this working okay? Or it feels like I'm ripping it, hulking it off. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just allow me to talk briefly about my children, Elias and Willa. So Willa, who is now in Africa studying philosophy in Kenya, she was an overachiever when she was young. She was a black belt in Subakdo. Here she is with the founder of Subakdo. When she plays a musical instrument, what does she play? The most badass instrument of all, the saxophone. And who does she hang out with in Washington? Gina McCarthy, the most badass EPA director of all time. Elias, on the other hand, you can barely take him to the doctor to get a shot without him complaining. And he lies around. He's a gnome collector, and I'm not joking. This is his gnome collection. And that shirt says, "Oh, gnome, you didn't." So this guy is not an overachiever like his sister. He did a test in 5th grade. The test was, what are you likely to be? What is your top skill? Number 2, I think, 2 or 3 on the list was airline baggage handling supervisor. And friends of mine work in the airline industry. Nothing against that. But he's not playing the saxophone and hanging out with Gina McCarthy. Okay, but here's the deal. Elias, we had a friend who was a reporter for the Insert Parade magazine, which is in all national. It goes to 15 million people. It's in all national papers. They said, "Do you know anyone who collects weird stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know somebody." And it's my son, and he's 8 years old. Will you let us talk to him? Yeah. So Elias gets interviewed in a national magazine, and it gets published, and overnight he's world famous. And Willa has done all this stuff, and she doesn't get anything. And Elias, we start getting packages to our house wrapped in twine with shaky handwriting from North Carolina. And I'm like, this is a bomb. In my work and your work, you're always like, is there anthrax in that package? And so we open it. It's a gnome. And he starts getting gnomes from all over the country. From one woman named Eunice in North Carolina whose husband had died, and she collects gnomes, and we're friends with her to this day. So why am I telling you this story? It's funny, and it's hard to be in a conference, so it's funny. But what I'm telling you, this is a story that you could all replicate and do about your children, about your cousins or nieces or wife. This is a story of human thriving. And human thriving doesn't occur in the landscape I showed you in 2095. And the question we're essentially asking here, it's not about business and marketing and national security. It's the question of, what do we have to pay to live a life where our humanity can be best expressed, that includes beauty and justice? Many of you are working in sustainability and justice. So The things that allow humans to thrive are not possible in a world that has experienced 3 degrees Celsius of warming, which is what we're headed for. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying, if you're in sustainability, you have to solve the climate problem, and you have to solve it at a systemic level. Because the things that make us great, this is Nolan Arenado, who was third base for the Rockies until he defected to the Cardinals. I mean, this is amazing. This is amazing. Arenado is an artist. Miles Davis. The great wilderness areas that themselves are threatened by climate change. People are like, I do land conservation. Are you working on climate? No. Well, then your land's going to get parched, and it's going to be totally different. Emmylou Harris. If you wonder about art and culture, I work in the ski industry, and skiing, and you say those things are superfluous. No, they're not. These are what allows us to grow and change and thrive. There's an artist named Anthony Weiner who died a couple years ago, and he said, I don't want my art to F up your day. I want it to F up your whole life. And the reason dictators in the last century and in this century, the first people they killed off, Stalin, Hitler, Mao, who'd they kill off? The poets, the artists, the thinkers. All these people that I'm showing you were who died first, because they pushed us to another level of thinking and allowed us to thrive as people. And the natural world, I don't know how many of you are fishers, but this is a mature brook trout. If you've ever caught a brook trout and you're bent down holding that fish in the water and you look at these maps and mazes on the back, this is what Cormac McCarthy ended his book, The Road, with, this image. And it gives you a sense of the profound, the amazing nature of existence on Earth, the weird short time we have to be here, and what you're trying to do when you're here. And in theory, we're all working on the ability to thrive as humans. I love this NASA site where you can download temperature anomaly. Now I'm glad you're all the worst nerds in the whole conference, but look at the dark red. That's an 8.3 degree anomaly over the average of the last century. Celsius, that's insane, that's another planet. And what's warming fastest? Siberia, which you could be like, well, Siberia's cold, it's fine, and all the prisoners there will be happy. But that's all frozen permafrost with methane. Okay, that's one thing. It's the northern boreal forests, which are on fire in Canada. This is all carbon going into the atmosphere. So we don't live in a world, if we don't change the trajectory we're on, we don't live in a world where we can thrive. This is my town, hometown Basalt. This is Pete McBride's porch. He took this picture. These tanker dumps at $1 million a pop saved the town. The town spent $40 million saving us from fire. $40 million. The school teachers, a school teacher with 20 years experience is making $60,000 in a place where the rent's $3,000 a month. These are resources that we as a people can't afford to spend because we're not then spending it on the things we want. We become a survival society. One of my favorite books is Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and that image of that where all you're trying to do, you're recovering from the flood. I guess we're not going on vacation. We're sumping out the basement. The road's being repaired so we can't rebuild the school. That's what we have to avoid, as this is paradise. And we're not even close to it. Atmospheric CO2 keeps going up. The groups like the World Bank and the International Energy Agency, these are not radicals. These people do not smell like patchouli, and they're not wearing sandals, and they're shaving their armpits. These folks, the Pope too said we're too late for 2 degrees Celsius. Too late for 2. 1.5 Celsius was the threshold between adaptability and catastrophe. There's a climatologist named Kevin Anderson who used to work at the Tyndall Center. He said 3 degrees Celsius. No, he said 4 degrees Celsius. We're actually headed toward about 3.7 right now. And these are his words, inconsistent with a global organized community. So what a nerd, what a wonky thing to say. Let me put it in terms you can understand. Mad Max is a non-organized global community. And democracy starts to fall apart. And social order starts to fall apart. And so in response to that, what do we as citizens, Americans, corporations do? We change the light bulbs. That's crazy. We do all these things that are operational and focus on ourselves. Caitlin is right on recycling. 10% of plastic has ever been recycled. We've spent 60 years on it, encouraged all the way by the fossil fuel industry. How much longer should we try? It's complicity to do that. Who wants you to recycle? Coca-Cola, that opposes all the bottle bills that have ever showed up in the United States since the 1980s. So Barry Lopez said, we want to be meaningful. We want to do important things. We want our lives to be exemplary in some way. So I'm giving suggestions as to that opportunity. But first, here's the darkness. CSR, ESG, whatever bunch of words you want to buy into. These are the kinds of things that we do. They're all focused at the firm level, as if the business had nothing to do with society. They include supply chain stuff. They include third-party certifications, even B Corp. And B Corp has all these benefits. These are all great. You should do it. But what if you said, here's what the fossil fuel industry would want you to do to ensure that you didn't change the economic system entirely based on fossil fuels? What would you want them to do? What would you want? You, I'm the fossil fuel industry, you and corporations, here's what you should do. The same shit. Exactly, because none of it affects system change. None of it involves policy or legislation or uncomfortable stuff like your CEO saying, hey, we need climate policy. How many of your CEOs have written a letter or an op-ed in the paper saying we need federal climate policy? Did you come out in support of the Inflation Reduction Act? Those kind of things. So what's the dangerous stuff that you should do? What does the fossil fuel industry fear? They fear revolution. Peaceful revolution's fine. They fear being called out for duplicity and hypocrisy. They fear op-eds in the Wall Street Journal saying, you gotta do something on climate. They fear anything that might affect the system and the structure and the fossil fuel economy. What I'm saying is that conventional corporate sustainability, which I cut my teeth on, is complicit with the status quo, and the status quo is 4 degrees Celsius warming. Cormac again. All things of grace and beauty, such that one holds them to one's heart, have a common provenance and pain. Short story, anything meaningful is difficult. Reinhold Niebuhr, the philosopher, said, nothing of any importance will be achieved in your lifetime. So solving climate and achieving sustainability, it's going to be hard. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be super difficult. You should be like, I'm in, because that's what we do. That's what humans do. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to blaze through some thinking on how you ought to think about this problem. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you to get a 6-pack of beer or iced tea and get with your best friends and say, where's our leverage and where's our power? Because this is about power wielding. So let me give you a few examples. I'm going to start with this one. I was working on carbon footprint for like 7 years, and we did everything. Retrofits of boilers, LEED certified buildings, LED lighting retrofits, CFL retrofits. Our carbon footprint was going up. And I was like, what's going on? So I dug in. It took me 2 days. The utilities' carbon intensity had gone up. Oh my God, this was an epiphany. We have to change the utility, not ourselves. This is what I'm saying. So we started looking into it. What is a utility? Oh, we have a rural electric co-op. It has an elected board. It's all old white ranchers who've never been contested in an election and don't use email. So you could probably beat them if you just ran a candidate. What if you ran a weird part of the human species called a woman? Well, no woman has ever been elected to the board. In 1937, there was a woman on the board. She was appointed in the founding board. And then no more women. So we said, we're going to find somebody. And I was like, this will be easy. hey, would you run for the board of the utility? I'm sorry? Will you run for the board of the rural electric co-op? Why would I do that? It's the most boring job you could possibly, you couldn't create a more boring job. Yeah, it is boring. But I need you to run. I can't, whatever. I called everyone. I finally got to a woman who ran a greenhouse in Newcastle. Yeah, I'll run. Lynn Dwyer became the first woman ever elected to the Holy Cross board and started a revolution. It took 15 years. It was painful. I got yelled at by the CEO of the utility. I got criticized by board members. I got called basically a cheat. My company said, you can't advocate for the utility board anymore. Today, my company says, look at what we did with Holy Cross. But in the middle of it, they were like, Auden, you're speaking for yourself, right? It was too controversial. We took over the board, look them up, one of the most progressive utilities in the world. They're headed for 100% renewable energy by 2030, and that's when we'll be 100%. No RECs, no offsets, we'll wait, real work, difficult, hard, painful, all things of grace and beauty. Another thing we did is, I'm in the outdoor industry. This story is directly applicable to you. The outdoor industry is like 40 to 100 million people. It never has wielded any political power. The gun lobby, NRA, at its peak was 5 million people, 2 million of which were active. It wasn't that they had money, it's that they had passion. Who is more passionate than an outdoors person? These are people who cut holes in garbage bags and ski down Mount Hood in the winter, in the rain. And who's more passionate than the pet industry? No offense, I'm a psychopath outdoor guy. You're crazier. You love your pets. You're all in. You get the love, the interspecies connection, the amazingness of a dog, all those different things. There's a guy, I don't have a pet. And where are you politically? This is and when you mobilize, think about the outdoor industry. You didn't get into climbing or skiing or hiking to be politically engaged. You're trying to avoid it. So all those votes are additional. And Protect Our Winners is the group doing that mobilization. My company loaned me to Protect Our Winners for 10 years to help build the organization. It's $7 million budget now. It started at like $150,000. And they've helped swing elections in states like Montana where you pull out the progressive climber, gym, skier vote, and you flip an election and win by something like 30,000 votes. That happened in 2018. So that's what I'm talking about. You mobilize politically. Okay, here's another quick example. One day I'm in my office, I get a call from an environmental group called Forest Ethics. Hey, will you ban tissue Kleenex? I'm like, what? Ban Kleenex. Why? Kimberly-Clark, big multinational, owns Kleenex. They log endangered forests. They don't use post-consumer waste. I said, okay, we'll do it. This is a really long, fun story. I'm going to shorten it for time's sake. I did it, and we got absolutely crucified in the press. So Aspen Skiing Company, which flies people from Europe, wearing leather pants and carrying small dogs, is so green that they're banning Kleenex, like crucified. And I had to go to the CEO and say, I'm sorry, this is embarrassing. It was a screw up. We shouldn't have done it. Or we should have done it, but I shouldn't have talked about it. And 10 days later, the CEO of Kimberly-Clark calls us. At the time, our ski resort was barely profitable. Kimberly-Clark was a $20 billion company, bigger than half the nations in the world. The CEO says, hey, you're Aspen. We don't want you banning Kleenex. So we now have a CEO to CEO 2-year conversation, along with 700 other people who joined the boycott. We didn't do it. It was this group thing. But we're talking to the CEO. Hey, here's what we want you to do. Come on, come on, come on. They changed how they practice forestry, a major climate solution globally. Again, you have leverage like this. Petco, whatever. If you start pushing, people don't get pushed on. Elected officials for years were able to say whatever they wanted on climate and deny science and take no action. Even Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, a swing Republican who's like, state is being destroyed by climate change. So we said, instead of doing a marketing campaign that's a skier on a blue sky day, which is what everyone does, We said, we're going to do a climate campaign. We're going to call it Give a Flake. We're going to put out 1 million postage-paid postcards to Lisa Murkowski's office saying you got to do more. We did it that day. Lisa Murkowski's office called our CEO. What the hell are you doing? I'm trying to help you with this stuff, and you're attacking us. So I, of course, get the blood pressure-raising call from the CEO. Auden, what are you doing? Murkowski's calling me. And I'm like, yeah, we're pressuring elected officials in a way they've never been pressured before. Again, we're not solving climate. I'm telling you how to think about this problem. And I'm almost done here. Time, people. Another example, quick example. I was loaned by my company to sit on the Air Quality Control Division in Colorado, which made climate policy. We passed zero-emission vehicle rules, HFC rules, methane leakage rules, while I was being paid for SKICO. You guys can do this too. If I can get on that board, you can too. And here's the other thing. Going to Washington, and you should do this, and lobbying for climate, they love it. The elected officials, all they get is oil executives. It's so boring. But when a skier comes, we brought gold medal skiers and Olympic medalists, and they're like, show me your medal. Can I bite your medal? Here's Ted Deutsch and 2 of the best skiers in the world, Angel Collinson and Hadley Hammer. Look at how much fun they're having. So it's not, climate shouldn't be the end, just so terrifying that you want to go in the closet, order Chinese food, and drink whiskey. This is scary. You're basically being asked, hey, I'm asking you, you, to be a part of saving civilization. And your response is, I may not be the guy, I'm just a pet person. I wake up 3 times a night to pee, and I often feel depressed when I'm doing that. I don't have a lot of game, I'm not Jackie Robinson. But history is full of stories of people with no power, and you have power because you're in the business world, who have done amazing things. This is Mohamed Bouazizi, the Tunisian vegetable vendor, who was so frustrated with how he was treated by the police and governance that he set himself on fire and started the Arab Spring. I'm not saying, and he died. And I'm not saying set yourself on fire, but Bouazizi was probably the least powerful human in the world, and he started something that we don't know how it's going to end. And you should be on fire for this issue because it's so comprehensive. I'm ending here with, this is Raphael's painting of the Genesis story of the burning cities on the plain. You know the story. Lot, God says, this city's bad. It's full of bad people. I'm going to burn it down. I'm going to send an angel down, though, to say, hey, Lot, you're my buddy. You can go. Get out. And just one thing, don't look back. So God tells you not to look back. You probably shouldn't look back. What does Lot's wife do? She looks back. Kurt Vonnegut tells about this story. He says, so they leave the city, and of course, Lot's wife looks back, and she got turned into a pillar of salt. And he says, but that's why I love her, because what she did was so human. Think about that. If you look back in that city, in that burning city, that's where you took your kids to first grade. That's where you had your first kiss and got married. This is your life. Of course you look back. And with climate change, what you're being offered is the opportunity to participate in saving civilization. No generation has ever had this before. And it's also an opportunity to endow your life with some of the oldest and greatest aspirations that humans have ever aspired to. Words like grace and dignity and tolerance and imbuing your life with those things. And so I end, this is my daughter, when she was little. Great hair, she still has that. What do you want to do with your life? Do you want to do carbon accounting for the rest of your life? Do it, you should. And you should get political, and you should get dirty, and you should be uncomfortable, and people should confront you in the supermarket aisle, and you should have that civil conversation. It's this incredible opportunity, and you will be taking it in the next 20 years. Thank you.